As humans, we are all defined by several synonyms or words representing who we are to ourselves and others. Hence, this is for you. Hello, dear humanity. Welcome to Season 3 of Human Thesaurus. I'm your host / steady, Wishronkio Peacock. Human Thesaurus is an intersection between a vast lexicon and what best describes our human nature. It's my conversation to highlight people like you and me, reflecting on their own embodiment of their stories with the synonyms of themselves. With this podcast, I chat with my fascinating friends and acquaintances who I love to talk to about everything under the sun. It's like catching up with them in a cafe or over cocktails, and here you are, eavesdropping on our conversations while we explore what words define who they authentically are. And this season, I'll throw in special episodes with deep dive human elements, so watch out for this exciting expansion of my pod. Subscribe now! Margaux, my mother-in-law, lives on a beautiful island of Waiheke in the north of New Zealand. Living there suits her as she enjoys outdoor activities and being part of a small community. She likes the way that in small communities, people wrap themselves around others not only in support but also to create fun. There are numerous events and festivals that are held on Waiheke, mainly raising funds for good causes or creating opportunities for diverse interest groups. So soon after moving there from mainland Auckland, she realized that if she wanted to attend any of these activities, that she needed to get involved too. Without volunteers, these community events can't happen. She then discovers that it can be so much fun working with a group to make something special happen that gives pleasure or opens up opportunities to others. She no longer works in the corporate world, so she has time to indulge in some of these feel-good projects. And it's quite a contrast of lifestyles, but she's so natural with it. I met Margaux, of course, through my husband, and she's such a great mom to me from the get-go. From the first time I've met her, she's very warm, and I don't have my parents anymore. So having her by my side gives me enough confidence that I'm loved, that I have someone to turn to because, I've got a lot of mood swings, but she's always there. She's very thoughtful of everyone around her. So I'm just so grateful to have her in my life. She's so active. She's stronger and more energetic than I will ever do. She walks in Waiheke, especially during Saturday. She walks like an hour from a beach to another. I can't keep up with her. Like I needed to pause going upwards towards the hill, like zigzaggy trails, because I needed to keep up with her, but I can't. She's that energetic, and I always admire her about all of these strength and, internally, externally, and all of these things. I'm just very grateful to have her in my life. My synonyms for Margaux are breeze as a noun, fulfilling as a verb, and compassionate as an adjective. Within this conversation, you'll further understand why I describe her as such. So here she is, Margaux Peacock.
Hello, my name is Margaux, same as the words shadow as a noun, journeying as a verb, and sunny as an adjective. I like the word wonder and dislike the word belligerent.
Oh, thank you, Mom. Oh my gosh, finally I got to convince you to to be on my show. Thank you so much. How are you? How's it going?
Oh, it's good. Yes, I don't know how I let you convince me to do this because it's not really my comfortable place. I don't like being in the spotlight, which is, I guess, why I chose the word shadow.
Oh, yeah, I was wondering about that.
One of the reasons. The other is because I prefer to listen than to talk. And I like listening because I like to know what other people are thinking and listening for their ideas because I'm quite curious.
Yes, you are. You're always very curious. You're always listening and very interested with others. What do you think made you become this person, the beautiful person that you are? Is there something from your childhood that created this? Like, what do you think
Well, I
made you
have no
grow?
idea really, because as a child, you think everybody is the same as yourself, really, and that their families are the same. But I had a very wonderful set of grandparents who lived on Waiheke, and it's probably the reason that I wanted to live here, because it's my happy place, and they were the people who made it my happy place. I absolutely adored them. I don't know really why I adored them so much, but I guess it was that unconditional love, and the holidays that I had with them here were always very special.
Yeah.
And I also have a wonderful mother myself. So it's the daughter of these grandparents. And, she is a great mum, I should say, not in the past tense. She's still alive. And I guess it was always unconditional love. You knew that she loved you.
Yeah.
And she's still like that with everybody.
Yes, that's true. That's true. If you don't mind me asking, because I lost my mom at 27 years old, and I can't imagine having a mom for a longer time. You're seeing her at an old stage, pretty much older stage in life. And does that change the dynamic between mother and daughter at all? Because I have no idea growing older with your mother.
I think probably the dynamics change at different stages of your life. I think that there's probably one stage when you're a child, and then it changes when you become a teenager. Not always and then it changes when you develop an adult relationship with your mother. Probably the same with both parents, but let's talk about mothers. And that's quite different from the childhood relationship. But we've always had a good relationship. And in fact, I wasn't too difficult as a teenager because I didn't feel that there was anything much that I wanted to rebel against with her, because I guess she gave me enough freedom and guidance that I didn't feel that I had to fight her, which is lovely because we've never fought. But just in recent times, that relationship's changed again. She's turned 100 recently, but let me think. She was driving until she was about 94, and once she gave up driving, her world got smaller, and she depended on me to take her places, whether it was to the doctor or shopping or any of those things. And so she started to becoming more dependent on me, where she had before then been a completely independent woman and enjoyed being independent, loved it. In fact, finds it hard not to be. And then she never got comfortable with computers. And so as checks disappeared and you had to have internet banking, she's relied on me more and more for quite personal things, really, that she was very proud to be able to manage on her own. And so now when it comes to sort of bureaucratic things like banking or
phone bills.
Yes, or recently she's moved into care, so closing accounts with various companies. She would have done all that on her own until just recently.
Mm.
And so it's changed again. But I'm also very aware that she's an independent woman and she deserves to be given as much responsibility for herself as she can cope with.
Yeah.
And that's always an interesting balance, because you'll get people looking at her and thinking she's an older woman, so they talk to me. And I say, no, you ask my mother. She's quite capable of answering your questions.
Yeah. So what's the biggest advice, the most valuable advice that Grandma that you've gotten from her?
Well, I don't think she gives advice. She probably shows it. She's a great example, and such a great example. I don't think I'd ever be able to live up to that example. Even when she's old and tired, she's been fiercely independent and wanting to be able to cope with everything in life.
Yeah.
She doesn't give up, and she's quite pragmatic about situations that she finds herself in. If she can't change them, she will work out a way of living with it rather than fighting against it, which is a very interesting observation, because most people, they just get frustrated or angry or the normal human responses. But she thinks about things and she'll find a way of getting around the issue, whatever it is. One example I can think of was her skin has got very tender, I guess. And so sometimes when people shower her, they dry her by rubbing, as most of us do. We rub with a towel, but that causes her to bruise.
Yeah.
And so the way she gets the message across to the people without them feeling uncomfortable that they've bruised her is just beautiful, really. She's just so lovely with them, teaching them to be gentle with her without making them feel bad that they've done something that actually caused her pain or bruising. And so they listen to that because it's so beautiful, and she's made them feel special
and respected.
And so they do what she wants.
Yeah. So how about you? When you became an adult and until now?
I haven't become an adult yet because I'm waiting until I don't have any parents.
That's kind of true. That's what I always say. You're not truly an adult until you lose your parents. That's in my experience. But all throughout these years, as you became a mother, etc., hopefully a grandma at some point.
Nice.
It would be nice, yes. And so, I'm blushing at the moment. So what made you stop sometimes, like, oh my gosh, I'm becoming like my mother? So do you have those moments? And what are those moments? If you can remember these kind of special realizations.
When I was little, I spent a lot of time here on Waiheke. And so there were people who had known my mother since she was a girl because she was brought up down here. So from as early as I can remember, people have said to me, oh, you must be Winsome's daughter. So I've always thought that I've been like my mother, even though I don't think I can live up to her high standards.
So you're like at the doppelganger? Everybody reminds you of Winsome then.
Well, not so much these days, but certainly when I was little, and it was something that I lived with or learned to live with.
Tell me more about your childhood. It's something that we don't really discuss much about, but yes, I've heard bits and pieces here and there. But can you tell me more who Margaux is when she was a kid?
I was very shy, which is partly the shadow business. And that's because I guess I'm naturally an introvert, although in the corporate world you can't be an introvert. So I had to find ways around that.
Yes.
And if you want to learn enough, you do. The most precious moments of my childhood were down here at Waiheke. And it was all about being with the grandparents that I adored and having their trust enough to give me an amazing amount of freedom. I don't know whether they realized or deliberately did this, but in those days, there weren't very many people down here. You weren't worried about strangers or anything like that.
Yeah.
And so I don't think I was ever told, but I understood that you went outside after breakfast and you didn't come back till the next meal, and then you went outside and you came back for the next meal. And if you didn't come back, then somebody might think, oh, I wonder where Margaux is, and perhaps do something. But because I got hungry, I guess I always came back. But I would walk sometimes for miles and miles on my own as a little girl, and I had all sorts of little adventures. And that sense of freedom has driven probably how I parented and what I have aspired to be as an adult, really, giving myself the freedom to do that, but also encouraging other people to have the freedom to be independent and not so worry so much about the things that could go wrong. Because, you know, anything can go wrong anytime. You don't need to be going out adventuring for things to go wrong. Most accidents happen in the home.
That's right. That's right. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Well, you're very cute as a kid too, because I saw some of the photos. So cute. How about...
I did a bit like a shadow as a child, though. I was the youngest and the quietest, and I wasn't a son.
And then in the corporate world, can you tell me more about career-wise? As an introvert, you're in marketing, right? Can you tell me more about that? Like, did you enjoy that a lot? How did you get into it during your period when you were working?
Well, I'll go back a little earlier than that. You know, I got old enough that when I was thinking about careers, there were things that girls were allowed to do and things that boys did. And there wasn't much crossover.
Right.
And I wasn't very interested in anything that the girls were allowed to do. So I can remember we had at secondary school a woman who just for a couple of hours after school, I think one day a week, she would talk to people if they asked questions about careers. So I went to see her and I said, look, I can't think what I want to do. And she handed me an A4 sheet of paper with typing on it, and it was all the careers that girls could do. Nursing, librarian, teaching, typing, all those, nursing, all those sorts of things. And I said, there's nothing on this list that I get excited about.
Yeah.
And she grumpily said, okay, then write down all the ones that you don't want to do. So that was pretty hopeless. So I don't know why I thought about this, but I thought that I might like to be a occupational therapist. And so I talked to my parents about that, and they thought probably that I was too sensitive to do the training that was done in what those days was a place where people with those sorts of difficulties were put in institutions, so they lived there, so the mentally affected people and that sort of thing. And I think they thought that I wouldn't be able to cope with that emotionally. So I ended up going to train as a teacher. And as I was going through that training, the idea of teaching intellectually handicapped children, or special needs children, they call them these days, caught my attention. And so at university, that's what I specialised in. But in specialising, I realised that we knew nothing about it in New Zealand. There was nobody with any real knowledge, and possibly I should have pursued that and gone overseas and studied and come back and did something. But I'd probably met a man by then or something. And so I taught for a year, and then we went overseas. I came back expecting my first baby, and you couldn't get a job as a teacher if you were pregnant or having young children. Wouldn't allow it in those days.
Wow. Okay.
And so I ended up having 3 little babies, including your lovely husband.
Yes, thank you.
And when I was ready to get my teeth back into it, I went back to the thought of teaching special needs children and realised that I didn't think I could be a good mum and a good teacher because when I had taught, it took up all my thinking time. I was always thinking about little so-and-so down the back. I wasn't meeting her needs or his needs or whatever. Now, what could I do to get her excited, or what could I do to just draw this little one out? And I was looking through the world with teacher's eyes, and I thought that's not fair on children, to your own children, to have a mum who's trying to do 2 jobs that don't really work so well together, or not as the way I did it anyway. I always felt I was a 24-hour day teacher and didn't have anything left for children. So a friend told me about a job that was being a teacher at the airport. And it was used for teaching outside the classroom, they called it. So teachers would take the class on an outing for some different sort of learning, something that perhaps they didn't know much about. And so I applied for it because it gave me the holidays off and it was only school hours, so I could be home with the children.
Yeah.
And I took the role on quite seriously because I thought, I know nothing about airports. I know nothing about the science of how planes can fly. I don't know anything about how they work from up in the control tower, or how they manage in New Zealand to stop introduced insects or pests going into the country. It was like a new world for me. I thought, well, most teachers probably don't know about that. So if I can make material that helps them so that they can impart information to children, maybe I'm doing the teachers a favour as well as the children. And so I put quite a bit of effort into that. And in the meantime, the government that owned the airport decided that they were going to make it like a business. They called them in New Zealand at that time state-owned enterprises, where the state owned them, but they were run as corporates.
Right.
And so we got a chief executive. And the chief executive at some stage must have asked somebody, who's an expert on this airport? Who would know? I'm new to this place. I've not worked in an airport before. How that I can understand it? Everybody scratched their head because each one had their own area of expertise, perhaps. But no one had the overview. And somebody said, there's this lady who comes in sometimes. She might have something. And so I got a message given to me when I was out with a group of kids, maybe a whole school or a whole class or whatever, told that the chief executive wanted to see me now. And so I sent a message saying back, I'm busy now. This is, I've got a class of children. I'll come and find out what you want when it suits me, sort of thing.
Yes, woman.
So I finished what I was doing. This is the introvert that I'm talking about. And so I got the message, well, can you bring up any information that you've got? So I had this huge file of information.
Yes.
And so I sent that up. And he must have had a PR man or somebody who was going to do some work for him, who looked at this and was gobsmacked, I think. So from there on, life changed because they could see that I could write because I'd written a whole lot of programs. They could see that I understood what was going on and that I was curious about things, all that stuff. So they asked me if I would help this fellow write up some stuff. And so I said to him, look, can I write it? You know, you give me the brief of what you want. Can I write it? And then can you critique it so that I can learn?
Right.
So that's how it all started, really. And then the chief executive only told me years ago that it really riled him that I only worked part-time, but he actually never asked me if I'd work full-time. It was only later that it happened, but no one asks. So eventually I sort of moved away from what I'd been doing and did a lot more public relations type things. But because we were breaking new ground, we got into all sorts of things like changing the culture of the place, which had been very male-dominated and very military-dominated. After the war, the people who got into jobs, places like airports, were people who had been in the military.
Oh, okay.
And so they were all focused on the rules. And airports have lots of rules for safety and for government set rules. And so the whole place was based around getting people to obey the rules and work through the rules. There's nothing to do with customer service or the experience of being there or whatever. The rules were more important than the people.
Right.
So I was involved in trying to turn that round so that people were more, their experience was as important as the rules being obeyed, because they obviously had to be obeyed, but you can do it in ways that you may get technology to help with, or you ask in a different way. It's not a, you can't do that, sort of attitude. That's, you do it in a completely different way. So we changed their uniforms from military type uniforms, which was very difficult because they like their military uniforms, the ones with lots of stripes on them and
gosh,
whole military thing and buttons on
the shoulder,
buttons on, really macho stuff. And so it was quite hard because they didn't actually want to do that. But they discovered really quickly when the uniforms were changed that people started speaking to them nicely.
Nice.
They were being, treated like traffic officers that we had that were always, growling at you because you parked wrong or you're going too fast. And if they spoke to you, they were always, I'm right and you're wrong. And wouldn't listen to any excuses or anything. So we had to change the tone. So I was involved in that quite early on, which was fun.
Wow.
And then what were some of the other things? The newspaper at that time used to put in a column of all the ships coming into Auckland and all the aircraft that were flying in.
Oh.
It's very out of date now, but they decided that they weren't going to do that anymore. I guess there were more flights coming in and more ships, and people weren't so interested anymore. But it meant that we had to let people know when planes were coming or whatever, so that you'd know what time they were coming. So we started a radio station.
Really? Oh my goodness.
Tell people, because there's no internet, there's no cell phones, it's not an app you can do it. So that they could tell you, what flights were on time and all of that sort of thing. And so I helped set up a radio, and I did write a copy for some of that, and so that was quite interesting.
Wow.
And then we were doing quite a lot of renovations in the international terminal that were being disruptive. So I decided that we should start a newspaper.
Oh.
So that everybody who worked on the airport and even the taxi drivers coming to the airport would know what we were doing and why.
Yeah.
Because otherwise I thought people might say things like, oh, they're always doing things. It's always news.
Yeah.
Whereas if they were knowledgeable and could say, well, I work out there, so I know what's going on and I can tell you that this is what they're doing and it's going to be good because you've got a completely different attitude.
Mm-hmm. Word of mouth marketing.
Yes. And having people proud to be at the work at the airport.
Yeah.
Because they knew what was going on and they knew what was going on in various different departments. So I could do the rounds, having made all the contacts in all the different companies when I started off with learning about the airport, because that curiosity had come in. I'd ring up, let's say, in New Zealand, where they had their engineering plant, and ring and say, I'd like to come and talk to somebody about what you do down there.
Wow.
I found that everybody loves talking about their job.
Yeah.
So you could ring up the control tower and say, hey, can I come and visit and see what you do?
Oh my gosh, so fun.
It was fun. So that was how I got that information in the first place, but I'd also developed some contacts so I could find out what was going on for writing the newspaper.
Mm-hmm.
Things like that. There were quite a lot more, but I won't go on and on. So the job just grew bigger and bigger because every time something else came up that I thought, I haven't done that before, can I do that?
Oh, yes.
It just kept getting bigger and bigger until I had to work full time, really.
Ah, I see. Wow. So that's why I was wondering, why were you good at chronicling and archiving the family's history, the details? You even remember when my mom and dad passed, so you check up on me during those times. I'm always in full awe how much you can keep tabs of all of these things, from the future, from the present, and also the past, most especially. And no wonder, because it's really like in you. It's naturally you. It's embedded in you, in your personality, to be this, to be very curious, but also to remember these details and applying it in such brilliant ways. And it's so great for me to hear more about your story, because you always listen about us. Like, I'm having a bad day, I'm having a good day, this is the drama, this is the gossip, and all of these things. So now understanding you better just makes me appreciate and love you more and more and more. It's just, wow, you've got an awesome career track, like career history. Wow. So, wow, I'm speechless. So, also, apart from your amazing career that I just heard, you're also such a great mom and daughter. So, what are some nuggets of wisdom can you impart to the younger generation about life in general?
I don't give wisdom much, I don't think.
Yes, you do. More than you ever know. Yes, you do. You always do to me.
I guess the Sunny that I talked about at the beginning is the trying to be positive and give people the benefit of the doubt and the trusting of people. Doesn't matter what anybody else says about them, but trusting them until you know from personal experience that they're untrustworthy, perhaps. But very frequently, those people aren't trustworthy with you because you've treated them differently. It's those sorts of things.
Yeah.
And letting things just slide like water off a duck's back, because you can think about people in different ways. You can listen to what somebody says and think, gosh, they're rude today. Or you can think, something's happened with them. They're not very happy today. I'll just give them an easy road, or I'll just be a bit gentle with them because something is disturbing them. See if I can just make life a little easier for them.
Yeah.
So I find people are pretty good to deal with, really.
Because you're good. You're patient and good, and you listen.
I do try and listen because you can learn so much from listening.
That's true.
And I don't mean just keeping quiet. I mean actively listening.
Yes. Yeah. In line with that, I've kind of learned that in my 20s as well, that no matter what your impression with any other people, whether they're even really good or really bad, you can learn something from them. You can always pick up something from each person. So you have to just really give it a chance.
But I don't actually think that there are really bad people. I think there are some people who do bad things, but I don't think there are really bad people. Some people have had really difficult upbringings or had trauma in their lives or whatever, but I don't know. I'm the optimist, I guess. I don't want to think that they're bad through and through.
But
I'm
that's
sure you
very
can always
good.
find nuggets of goodness in people.
That's a good mindset to have, I think. It gives you more peaceful stance in life, thinking that way, not being, let's say, not even judgmental, not being, cynicism. I think that stresses everybody nowadays. So if switching just a little bit of that mindset into something like yours, I think it gives you, like what you're saying as well, one of the major words that I've been picking up over and over is that sense of freedom, that freedom. So I think we owe ourselves and each other that, giving each other that benefit of the doubt for us to free ourselves of something unnecessary to think about instead of focusing on good things.
Because it makes you feel better too, I think.
Yeah, that's right. It does. It does. You've given me a lot of these things. Sometimes I just have to run through, in our conversations. I just needed to run all of the things in my head, verbalize it with you. And then in the end, I feel better because I can unbundle it because you're actively listening, and then you're giving me feedback, and then you're putting me on the ground and just really like, okay, yeah, that's a better way of thinking about things. And then after a conversation, I always have this smile on my face. It's like, oh, I feel much better. And it's not just feeling much better. It's really, you have a better frame of mind. That's what you give to the world.
Sometimes I think we all have to just go, blah.
Yes.
Get things out. They're just beginning to play on your mind or annoy you or something, and you just let it all out. It's like sometimes having a good cry. Just get it out. And then you can start pulling yourself together again. But sometimes it's necessary, and it's often very helpful to have somebody who you can to listen to you, because you can't. It's not quite as satisfying doing it in a little room on your own.
Absolutely. That's so right.
Yeah, so I can cope with people who just have to let it all out.
Yeah. I remember this is just recently. I'm gonna share it with you in connection with this, in line with this conversation. I was talking to Luke about the wedding. I said, we were watching something on TV, and I said, oh, at least our mindset with our wedding planning was so good that it didn't make me become a bridezilla or whatsoever. It's like I didn't have any massive meltdowns or whatever. And then he said, that's not true. I was like, really? You remember it differently. And then he said that, you had one meltdown when your wedding gown arrived in New Zealand.
Oh,
you were in such meltdown because the gown was a little bit ruined. It wasn't packed properly. And you were in such a meltdown. I was like, yeah, that's just one, right? It's like, yes. And then, so in line with that, I had that meltdown, but you were there the entire time all along. You were such a peaceful soul. You were so calm that in the end, you helped me solve it. That in the end, I calmed down as well. Like, in the end, I was
it
like,
wasn't much of a meltdown.
I can't remember much, to be honest with
anyone
you.
who might be listening. This beautiful, magnificent, most creative, you call it a gown even, work of art, arrived in the post and the packaging had all broken.
Yeah.
So there was bits of it sticking out here and there, and you didn't know whether it had torn or ruined completely or whatever. And you didn't really have a meltdown at all. And I could see your face and I'm thinking, now, how am I feeling? So we got it out and got it so that we could see if there was any damage done. And there really wasn't much damage.
Yeah.
And we hung it up and let it hang for a while. And then I think we got something to, so that we
had to steam it.
Steam it so that it was all right. But I thought you coped with that marvelously well.
Really?
Because it just was so awful.
I was devastated.
Farmers.
Yeah, I was so devastated. So I think like Luke kind of remembered it differently too. I can't remember much. It's just flashes of what I can remember. But what I could fully remember is that you were there and you were very calm. And yes, you were in awe of the gown while I was devastated. But in the end, we unbundled the situation and then we found someone who could help us in the city.
Yeah.
Yeah. But your sense of calm always helps me to just unfurl things and make myself less emotional, but more productive.
Well, it wasn't going to help either of us if I was and took you down too. Or we both said, ah!
Oh my gosh. Yeah, it was a funny memory of the entire thing, I think. But yes, you're always there. So that's why I'm confident that hopefully at some point when you have grandchildren, I'm ever so confident that, Mom, can you take care of the kids for at least a month?
We'll see.
Oh my gosh. Look forward to that. That can happen. They're not cats, you know. Oh my goodness. Yes. Okay. I'm going to pull it back down. You're also a very good reader. You always take time to read, which I am procrastinating to get back into at the moment. So can you kind of share like what's the most impactful book that you can remember that made a mark on you?
I just love books.
Yeah.
I learn something from almost every book I read, but some books are just really intriguing and interesting. I read a lot of nonfiction as well as fiction. And it just leads me. When I put journeying as my verb, that's one of the ways I journey is through reading, I suppose. Especially with the nonfiction ones, I often have to go off and Google this and that or look up maps and all the rest of it or go for a journey on YouTube showing the area or something.
How about
travel vicariously?
Yeah. Okay, I think that's really super hard then. How about any particular author that you always watch out for and make sure that you read their books?
I always read Geraldine Brooks' books.
Mm-hmm.
She often does a lot of research into her, so I like to learn something when I'm reading.
Mm.
So she's one that comes to the top of my head that I like to read. All of hers that come out. Should look up at my bookcase, shouldn't I? There are lots of people whose writing I love. There are some New Zealand writers that I enjoy because, not so much because I learn, but because it captures the essence of the country, and often with somebody like Patricia Grace, my childhood, because she lived near the beach too, and so she captures something that takes me back. But I'm always interested too in people from different cultures, so that I try and get an insight into how people from different countries think or how they respond to the different sort of similar sets of circumstances, but their approach might be different.
Right. Yes, that's right. That's wonderful.
Yeah, South African writers or Chinese writers, it's quite insightful. And even sometimes American writers.
Oh, yeah.
I just read not so long ago a book called Crossroads by Franson, I think his surname is. And it was intriguing. It was a family story, and intriguing how they just didn't communicate with each other.
Oh.
And they didn't seem to have a set of common values.
Wow.
On which to base the family.
Oh.
And I found that quite intriguing.
Yeah, that's quite complex. That sounds quite complex. Yeah. Well, thank you for that. And also lastly, like, what community projects do you have in Waiheke right now that you're busy about?
I'm contemplating leading a walk for our walking festival, which takes place in a few months. I'm going out with one of the organisers next week because it's 100 years ago at the end of this year that my grandparents came down to Waiheke and didn't go home.
Right.
My grandmother's mother had bought land and had her sons build her a little holiday home. And my grandparents had come down for a holiday and pitched the tent. They had 3 little children, my mother being the youngest at that time, and they didn't go home.
Oh, wow.
And that was right at the beginning of the development of Waiheke. So in this 100 years that I know about from either listening to the stories of my grandparents or from what I've witnessed during my lifetime or what I've heard from my mother, will give an insight into the part of the island where they lived and a bit of an oversight on the island over that 100 years. And I just thought that might be quite interesting for some people to do a walk where we show places where the old shop that they bought was and how that was run in those days and how they got the produce and how he picked it up with his horse and cart from the boat.
Oh, yeah.
And how the roads that they came in that went through a farm, and so you had to get off and open the gate and close the gate and that sort of thing several times along that road. It was before there was electricity, of course.
Yes.
And then where they moved to after that, and they ran, it coincided their moving with the Depression, so they had to change it, their guest house, so they could get some income from it, and what that involved, and that they had cows that they grazed right along the hills behind Oneitangi, which is now covered in trees and houses. And sheds and things. So it's quite different stories. A lot of stories along the way that I can tell, and I've got some old photos to go with it. So just running that idea past one of the organisers to see whether they think it would be interesting enough and the walk interesting enough. That's one of the things that I'm beginning to put my head around.
Oh, that sounds exciting. Let me know how you go. Is that I remember we went to that house, right, in Oneitangi, like in the middle of the hill with a gray cat in there as well. That was the
With the
house,
cat.
right? Where Winsome grew up at. It's a zigzaggy road in Waiheke. We went there because you were researching about
Was it where she grew up or where her grandmother had the place? Was it
where
away
her
from the beach
grandma
or
had
near
the place.
Yeah, so that was the
Ah,
little place that they went to, and I've got a photo of my mother there, 9 months of
ah,
age,
yes,
in this little cottage.
yes.
Of course, that great grandmother who I never met, she was a really interesting woman too. And I've done some research on. She was a very independent woman.
Love. It runs in the family.
It does. Just seeing if there's a pattern.
There is, I think.
Mm.
Okay, so in closing, what's the word that you can impart to our listeners and why?
Being forgiving, perhaps.
Mm,
So if somebody reacts badly or it sounds as if it's coming across in a way that you don't like to hear,
mm.
give them a bit of leeway because there might be a good reason for that. And if there's not, see if you can find a way of forgiving them anyway.
Yes, I love that. I love that. That's really good. It's very poignant. Mom, thank you so much for indulging me to be part of my show. Thank you for hanging out. It's always amazing to talk to you. I always grab new pieces to love and to care about and to think about. Thank you so much.
Well, I've got to thank you so much too, because we love having you in our family and you've added a new dimension to our family. So you've given us as much as we've given you, I'm sure.
Oh, I love you, Mom. Thank you so much.
Okay, love you too.
From this episode, one of the most important words about life is evocation. It is the act of bringing or recalling a feeling, memory, or image to the conscious mind. It's similar to words, summons, connotation, semblance, whisper, inkling, flashback, recollection, nostalgia. Dorothy Emily Stevenson, a best-selling Scottish writer from the 1910s to the 70s, quoted, "Most people, looking back at their childhood, see it as a misty country half forgotten or only to be remembered through an evocative sound or scent. But some episodes of those short years remain clear and brightly colored, like a landscape seen through the wrong end of a telescope." End quote. We thrive on memories and nostalgia. As we look back to our past, we can pick up perspectives that we never ever thought before. As time goes by, you keep on looking back, and that memory will evolve into something more meaningful to you. It may be like that, or it may be not, but I think it's essential for us to always look back in the past, not to open up hurt or open up old wounds, but really to reflect on how far you've come. Sometimes we need that. And also, when you look back in your life, you have to think how amazing that you lived so richly. Or if not, then you can correct your course. That's the beautiful thing about our journey. We can look back, and also the most important thing is to look forward as well. And like what my mother-in-law said, it doesn't need a lot to be kind, to be open to other people, and create memories with them too. Thank you for listening to Human Thesaurus. Please help me rate and subscribe because your support means a great deal. Join me again next week for another episode. And while waiting, why not listen to my past few episodes? You may find one of them spellbinding. I'm your host, Wish Ronquillo Peacock. Have a fantastic day and thanks for listening.